Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast, where we discuss each of Andrew McMahon's songs from throughout his career. We dig into one particular song in each episode. Thanks for listening. Well, we've had quite a bit of excitement here at the podcast this year already, so I figured let's just keep the momentum going, and for that reason, I brought a guest to the podcast tonight, and we're going to dive deep into maybe one of the most well-known songs in the modern Andrew era. I think I said that a couple episodes ago about Fire Escape. I would say this one's even more well-known, which we'll get into. Fortunately, I have Sam from the Pub Trivia Group podcast on the show to help chime in on this one. So welcome to the show, Sam.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Yeah, Andrew McMahon himself coming on your show really got the momentum going for 2023. Yeah. I'm the one that gets to follow him up.
Hey, you sent me this song, and I was like, hey, that's a great song to follow up such a big episode. So and we'll talk more about that. So
to all your new listeners out there, you came for like the greatest singer-songwriter of the generation, and you're going to stay for a high school history teacher from Minnesota. So
I love it. I absolutely love it. Being a former teacher and counselor myself. So, it's interesting. There have been several teachers on this show. You're either the third or fourth.
So what is that? Are teachers just drawn to Andrew's music, or are teachers drawn to being on podcasts because we're so used to talking all the time?
You might be onto something there. I was actually going to go the first with the latter, that I guess teachers just like Andrew McMahon in the wilderness. I don't know. But yeah, maybe it's a comfort in talking too. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
High school history teacher from Minnesota, originally from Wisconsin. Suburban dad, right? I live in suburban Minneapolis, have 2 young kids.
Okay.
Do host pub trivia on the side. That's kind of how I got into podcasting. Also have a podcast about the Minnesota United football team or soccer team. I'm just a pretty happy, normal guy. I guess that's all you could say.
Cool. Well, that's a good thing. I actually did get a chance. I'm glad I asked you about that Pub Trivia podcast because I actually got a chance to listen to a few episodes over the weekend.
Oh, really?
And I really enjoy it. So I listened to it by myself for the most part. The kids were in and out of the car because I was like running them places. But I enjoyed it because I was like, when they weren't in the car, I was like kind of like yelling at myself like, oh my gosh, I should have known that. And like, I was, playing along like you'd expect someone to. But it was more fun than I actually thought. And I like that they're such short episodes too. It's like, oh, I could put this on for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, I think was one of them, and do some trivia and, have some fun. My older daughter did catch a little bit of it, and it was in relation to Santa's reindeer. And so she enjoyed that category.
Now, I do a lot of times have music rounds. A lot of my regular listeners prefer that. And I host live trivia too, so the podcast kind of melds in with the live trivia that I host.
Oh, very cool.
And people love the music rounds. So I do a lot with music and with lyrics. I think with the podcast, I'm closing in on 50 podcast episodes, but I've also done about 50 live games. And I think there has been, my all-time favorite musical artist, Andrew McMahon. I think I've only had one question related to him, and it was a pop-punk specific game that I did where I think Hurricane was the song that was referenced there. But
awesome. Tell us about how you were first introduced to Andrew McMahon's music.
I'm about 5 years younger than Andrew, and I remember being in 8th grade, like wrapping up 8th grade in 2002, and just hearing like If You See Jordan or I Woke Up in a Car on alternative radio station in Madison where I grew up. So that's my origin story. I remember like just wrapping up middle school and being on like my Razor scooter, just scooting around my buddy's driveway and screaming along to High School's Over. And really, I had just finished middle school.
But you've been around since the Something Corporate days.
It's been kind of cool that his music has grown up with me, right? Like when I was an 8th grader, I don't think I would have liked Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. Something Corporate really spoke to me, but, a song like Cecilia and the Satellite would have probably been quite a bit over my head. And same now, like I don't know if I heard Punk Rock Princess for the first time today, if I would immediately go and download it. It's grown up with me. The music has grown up with me. As an angsty teenager, he was there for me. As a college kid trying to act a little bit sophisticated, I had Jack's Mannequin, and now I got adult contemporary. He's been with me the entire way, and I really appreciate him for that.
I couldn't agree with those sentiments more. I feel the exact same way about the growing up with his music. Well, as you all know, I love a good Andrew McMahon lyrical journey, and I've probably heard this song a lot more than the average Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness song. because it's more popular. It's, been on the radio and it's been around different places, which we'll touch on. But he paints a picture of his whole life. But then he also so reflecting back, but also looks to his future all in the same song. It's called Cecilia and the Satellite. The band is, of course, Andrew McMahon and the Wilderness. It is track 2 from the self-titled Wilderness album, released on October 14th, 2014. Sam, when you first reached out and said, I have some, and I said, what songs do you have in mind? The first one you had in mind was Cecilia and the Satellite. Does this song have a certain significance in your life?
Yeah. So my daughter, my firstborn, her name is Cecilia. I did not name her after the song. There was a very specific person in my family named Cecily that we named my daughter after.
Okay.
But having that in common, firstborn daughter with my favorite musician, I think is really cool. I, of course, have the lyrics for All the Things My Hands Have Held, The Best by Far Is You. Those, of course, are hanging up in her room.
Yeah.
Right above her bookshelf. I would say out of all of Andrew's songs, this is the one that is the most special for me, just because it's the song that makes me think of my daughter.
Absolutely. Now, does your daughter listen to the song? Does she react to the song at all?
She's 3.5, so yeah, she recognizes her name. I was doing some research for this podcast prior to hopping on with you, and she sees her name written on YouTube when I'm kind of looking at the music videos. She's like, hey, that's my name. So yeah, like she notices. I don't think she's not going to do a deep dive into the lyrics or anything, but she definitely notices.
What does this all mean?
Yeah. It is fun when I have a playlist going and it just sort of comes on randomly because she'll be like, hey, yeah, it's fun.
Being a huge music fan in general, and there's a lot of artists that I really love, I was looking for, when we named our daughters, not so much my wife, but I was looking for songs for inspiration on what to name them. And I was like, oh, how cool would that be to name our daughter after a song that we enjoy or a song by an artist we enjoy or something like that. So I kept that in mind, and we didn't end up going in that direction.
I'm a huge Andrew fan, but most music fans, when I say that my daughter's name is Cecilia, people start singing the Simon and Garfunkel song.
Of course.
I believe is in reference to writer's block because Cecilia is the patron saint of music. I believe that that's what the song is in reference to, but I remember telling everyone my daughter's name when she was born, and people just start singing that song. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Not exactly why I named her that, I guess.
I had a friend name their daughter a family name, and it was Barbara Ann.
Sure.
Ann was the middle name, and my immediate thought was Beach Boys, and I started singing that, and I realized that how offensive that might be. They're like, that's not why we named her that. So I was really embarrassed. I was like, well, I don't know, Barbara Ann. That's the first thing you think of, right? So maybe that's how people feel with Cecilia. That's, it must be because of that song.
And I think there's a Foo Fighters song called Saint Cecilia.
I forgot about that.
Yep.
This song that we're talking about, Cecilia and the Satellite, has multiple versions out there, which we'll touch on later. But I did want to mention here because one of those versions is on the Canyons EP, kind of a separate EP, if you will. And it's basically what they call the Canyons version of Cecilia and the Satellite. And I wanted to point that out because if you're an Andrew McMahon fan and you don't know about that, you need to get out there and listen to it right now, that whole EP, because it's wonderful. 4 songs from the self-titled Wilderness album, done with basically just a piano and backing vocals and very minimal instrumentation otherwise. But you can also listen on streaming services to that as part of the Andrew McMahon and the Wilderness Deluxe self-titled album as well. Prior to this song, or this album coming out in October of that year, 2014, this song was released as a single on August 12th, earlier that year. I know your reaction to the song has probably changed over time, Sam, but do you remember when you first heard this song, or like what your initial reaction was to it, since it was kind of different than the Jack's Mannequin era?
Yeah, I do remember. I would have been probably like mid-20s, a few years out of college when I first heard that, as well as the Pop Underground came out first. And yeah. I remember, right, I'm not going to lie, I kind of talked to you about how, right, each stage of his music has kind of grown with me. And of course, he's 5 years older than me. So sometimes I would say even like the Everything in Transit CD, when that first came out, I was kind of thinking like, oh man, like this is good, but I missed something corporate. I wanted something edgier. I was still a senior in high school when Everything Transit came out. I still wanted something edgier. Obviously, Everything in Transit turns out to be like one of the greatest albums of all time. So that one grew with me. But my initial reaction to even that album was, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I would say the same thing with the Wilderness era. When it came out, I hadn't listened to a lot of music with sort of, an electronic synthesizer or anything like that. So that took a little bit for me to get used to.
Sure.
Now I love it, but coming out of the Jack's Mannequin era, I just hadn't listened to anything like that. So it took me a little bit to get used to. That's really the main thing I remember, not necessarily anything related to Cecilia and the Satellite right off the bat. Other than I remember that one I shouldn't say strangely because it's a great song, but strangely in the sense that I had been listening to Andrew for years and never once had my mom heard one of his songs. And like just the attention that Cecilia the Satellite got, where you could go to a Walgreens and it would be playing in the background, or like you would turn on TV and see like the movie trailer for Pan, which you'll probably talk about later. And it was playing there. So I do remember thinking it was so crazy to be seeing Andrew McMahon sort of exit just the alternative sort of indie scene and be more part of pop culture in general.
It was quite a shift, actually, for all those reasons. I like the way you put that, absolutely. And so we had to kind of grow with them and figure out, okay, is this for me? But it sometimes it does take a little adjustment. Like, okay, what's this, and how does it kind of fit into what I know and what I love, and what do I love about this? So sure, there was a difference. That you referenced the Pop Underground EP. That was quite a shift from Jack's Mannequin album, the last Jack's Mannequin album, and then we got something a little bit different with the Wilderness record. So, speaking of which, with the record, so that was produced by Mike Viola, James Flanagan, and Andrew himself. It was recorded at multiple studios, so I'm not sure where Cecilia was actually recorded at. But on piano and vocals, of course, Andrew McMahon. Then on keyboards, Andrew McMahon and James Flanagan contributed. Mike Viola was on the bass. Most of the album was a collaboration between these three guys. It was kind of like they were the original Wilderness, if you will. Sam, did you recognize or do you know that there's no guitar on this track? You mentioned electronic, so I think you were in tune to that whole idea. But did that pop out at you right away?
I mean, I would recognize that now. I'm trying to remember if I thought about that back then.
I did not. It wasn't until I started this podcast and I started going through the liner notes on these albums, and I was like, wait, there's no guitar in any of these songs. There's only guitar on one song on that album, and it's Black and White Movies, I think, if I'm recalling correctly. Maybe there's another one, but not Cecilia and the Satellite.
Not like Canyon Moon? Isn't that?
No guitar.
Really?
So, I mean, I guess you can make any sound with a synthesizer.
Okay.
It probably
learn
sounds
something.
Like yeah, that just blew me away a few years ago. I remember where I was sitting on this laptop when I learned that, because I was just blown. I was like, wait, there's no guitar on these songs, and we were just so used to Andrew McMahon being in a band, right? Guitar, bass, drums, piano, or keyboard. And that element was no longer there for some of these songs. But again, I found out about it about 6 years after I first heard the album and was already in love with the album. I don't think it would have changed my opinion at the time but I was already used to that, the sound. But looking back on a song like Cecilia and the Satellite, it's just shocking. It's like, yeah, there's no guitar in it. It really is an electronic song, which is, I guess, hard to wrap my head around, because when you hear it, which I guess, hey, credit to Andrew and the other producers on that. It doesn't sound that electronic. It just sounds like a good song with instruments. I love that.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Like you can tell it's there, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm learning as we're going on this one.
And anybody listening, if I'm wrong on any of this, I invite you to. I always like when people message me just to chat about things, because I love talking music in general. But if there's ever anything I say on here that's like, I don't think that's right, feel free to call me out on it. I'm good with that. Like, because I want to learn too. Like, it sounds like you do. So
yeah,
the song did hit number 96 on the Billboard Top 100, and it reached number 5 on the U.S. Alternative Songs that year. So I think it was seen as a hit, by the producers, by the record company, and that sort of thing. So it was I think a bigger song than he'd ever had before. I think that whoever was in charge of promoting did a pretty good job of like pushing it out to different entities, right? And I think that will come up in our in our conversation. So you kind of alluded to this earlier, Sam, but why do you think that people know this song so well? Like outside of the Andrew fan base, let's say, like take all of us diehard fans out of it. How does like the general public know about this song?
I was just emailing you. It was on The Voice. Someone made The Voice auditioning with this song. I'm not a big Voice fan, but right, again, like as I was talking about earlier, I've been a fan of Andrew and his projects my entire, basically my entire music listening life. And it was really just people that were part of the scene that knew who he was. And now it's on The Voice? Right, like that show's huge. You have the dude from Maroon 5 and Gwen Stefani and Blake Shelton.
Yeah, I saw Gwen Stefani and Blake Shelton in the clip, and I'm like, wow, they're like reacting to Andrew McMahon music. This is really cool.
Right. That just wasn't what we were used to. Again, like hearing it in a Walgreens. I have memories of walking into Walgreens and being like, is this Andrew McMahon? Are they really playing Andrew McMahon right now? That never happened before.
I've heard him in Olive Garden.
In an Olive Garden.
Yeah.
There you go.
I feel like that album specifically, because I've heard Driving Through a Dream at Olive Garden and maybe Black and White Movies. So it's almost like that album must have been like pushed to, I don't know, whatever entity like then distributes it to restaurants and stores and things or something. So again, good job to the promoters.
Yep. They got that in with casual dining.
Yeah. I know that you mentioned Pan. So I just saw Pan for the first time either last summer or the summer before. Have you seen that movie?
No.
Okay.
I remember the trailers, but I completely forgot about it prior to doing the notes for this podcast.
So it was probably a result of doing this podcast is why I even thought to well, I think because my kids really started reacting to this song, this Cecilia and the Satellite song. So I was like, I don't know why that I kind of put that together, and I started thinking about Pan and how it was either, I don't think it was in the movie, just the trailer maybe, but I was like, oh, we should, I think I watched the trailer and I was like, that looks like a good movie for the kids. Like my kids were and still are perfect age for that sort of movie. And I remember watching it like on our back patio at night in the summer, and we put the projector up, and it was really fun. One of their friends came over. It sounds like I'm trying to sell the movie right now, but I'd recommend the movie. It was pretty good, but
it's probably on Disney Plus, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think that's how we watched it exactly. Yep,
nice.
It was either that or Amazon Prime. It's probably owned by Disney. I guess that makes sense. Hugh Jackman's in it. He plays the villain. So I also learned, I don't know if you knew this or not, but apparently it was featured on at least an episode of CBS's show, show Supergirl.
Oh, okay.
I read that somewhere, which that's interesting because like I think my parents have watched that show. And again, that's kind of like you mentioned The Voice.
Yeah.
So these are places that non-Andrew fans aplenty, right? I mean, millions of people watch these shows, and you're hearing this song either in the background or in the forefront, like in The Voice. And you're like, oh, that sounds familiar. And I bet those people who heard it on The Voice then maybe heard it on the radio or in passing at Olive Garden or Walgreens or something later on. And we're like, oh, I know that tune. I like that song.
Yeah.
And maybe it stuck with them. So it's just interesting to me to think about how this song, and how songs do. I guess that's fascinating to me, how songs do get popular or get known. And it happens with certain songs and it doesn't happen with others. And then lastly, what I have here is that it was featured in a trailer for a Steve Carell movie called Welcome to Marwen, which I'm a big Steve Carell fan, but I've never seen that movie.
I don't even remember hearing about that one.
I saw the movie like artwork. I recognized it, but that's the extent of it. I couldn't tell you a thing about the movie.
Kind of artsy, maybe?
It may be at one of his artsy dramas because he does.
Sure.
He does. If it was one of those goofy comedies, I probably would have seen it, to be honest. So I'm assuming it was more of a drama. But I guess I've been surprised when people like my dad know this song, right? And you mentioned that earlier, like when your parents started recognizing Andrew McMahon music.
Right.
When I was explaining to my dad a few years ago, he's like, so which artist are you going to see? And I was like, oh, I don't think you'd know him, but well, here's a song that was on the radio at one point. And he's like, yeah, I've heard that one. Of course, I know that one.
Hey, I went to a lot of Jack's Mannequin concerts when I was in college, and I remember always, telling my parents or grandparents, yeah, I'm going to a Jack's Mannequin concert, and they would kind of make a joke like, oh, which one is that again? And then they would make a joke implying that it was a Blink-182 concert or a Green Day concert. Like, all those bands sounded the same. And I'm like, you guys don't get it. Like, Andrew McMahon, Jack's Mannequin is different than Blink-182. Actually, they have nothing in common. Like, I can laugh at the all pop punk bands sound the same, but even Something Corporate wasn't really part of that, and no. Jack's Mannequin definitely wasn't. So
no way.
I was like, just give this guy a chance. And of course he does a show with Billy Joel at Lambeau Field, right? I'm from Wisconsin, and again, why do so many people know who he is all of a sudden? Well, he's on,
that's a good point.
His song is on The Voice. His song is in Disney movies. His song is in Steve Carell movies. He's playing with Billy Joel. It's
I didn't even consider that. He's opened for Billy Joel like 4 times. It's like, okay.
Yep.
And one of the people I mentioned earlier who I've had on the podcast who's a newer fan, that's how he learned about him. Not because he went to the show, but because he wanted to go to the show and saw that Andrew was opening. He's like, who's this guy? And he checked him out, and he's a huge fan now.
Oh, yeah.
Billy Joel, one of the biggest musicians on earth.
Right.
Obviously, he's a fan, or else he wouldn't be having Andrew McMahon open for him. So.
Right, yeah. I know so many like people 20 years older than me that only know Andrew McMahon because of Billy Joel. Because I'll post about him on social media, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I saw him at Lambeau. Like,
so speaking of concerts, let's talk about that. So I always like to check Setlist FM and see how many times it says that a song has been played. This one lists 474 times as of today. And on this one specifically, I want to state as of today, because I think we know that every time Andrew McMahon performs a concert, whether it be with Billy Joel or headlining or with Dashboard or whoever, he's probably going to play Cecilia and the Satellite. I guess there have been rare exceptions. I'll mention one of them, and I'm going to ask you in a moment if you know of any. But fun fact, when I started the podcast in 2020, all right, it was August 2020, I made a note of how many times Cecilia and the Satellite, because I was kind of tracking some of those more popular songs, how many times it had been played in September 2020. It was 428. So in 2 years and 3 months, it's been played 50 more times, which doesn't surprise me. And that's probably just about as many concerts that Andrew has played, not including live streams, of course, where it's just him. So the most recent time was in Colorado Springs at his show in mid-December, and I'm willing to bet the next time he plays Cecilia and the Satellite will be at the Innings Festival in Tempe next month, which is where he'll be. Have you ever seen Andrew live and not seen this song?
The only guess that I would have is 2016 when he did the Everything in Transit, like 10-year anniversary, but he might have even played it then. I'm trying to remember. I saw the Minneapolis show on that tour. I forget if he played that or not, but that would make sense for him to not play it. But I know he played some songs that weren't on Everything in Transit sort of after he wrapped things up. So I don't know.
I forgot. Now that was a tour as Jack's Mannequin, but still it's Andrew post Cecilia. I saw that tour in Columbus, and I don't know if he did play it. You're right, because I remember thinking, well, he played Everything in Transit, and then he played some other Jack's tunes, too. So he played some things off of Glass Passenger. And, yeah, they might not have played Cecilia and the Satellite. I didn't think about that one. The time that I was going to mention that I know they didn't play Cecilia and the Satellite, and I guess I was a little surprised, but not really, is, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, I saw Andrew McMahon on the Rock Boat about 14 months ago, and he was the headliner. He played 3 sets with the band, and then 1 set, just a piano, and with the guy from the lead singer, John Foreman of Switchfoot. And even in that solo show or duet or whatever you want to call it, he did play Cecilia there. But out of the 3 live band performances, he actually didn't play Cecilia one of the nights, which is good because we saw him 4 times that week. We saw Cecilia 3 times. Technically, we didn't need to see it a 4th time, but it's nice that he changed it up a little bit. So what we did get that night was Halls instead. And I can't remember if it was like Bobby or Morgan, who was the keyboardist, violinist at the time. One of them, he said, he's like, they wanted me to play this song tonight instead. So, and I was stoked because I love that song. It's one of my favorites off of the self-titled album.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't imagine, like, anytime I'm at a show these days and we get to the encore and he hasn't played yet, you know it's coming.
Yeah, there are 4 or 5 or 6 songs, we've said this before on the podcast, that I think he's almost always going to play unless there's some reason that he's not going to play it, but Yeah, so it sounds like you have some experience seeing Andrew. So tell me about your history with Andrew. Did you get to see him in the Something Corporate days, or was it not till Jack's Mannequin?
I was supposed to in 2003. I was supposed to see. I grew up in Madison. Madison's so close to Milwaukee that we don't get a lot of concerts.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting more. We're getting more now. But Something Corporate, they might have been opening for Good Charlotte, but I was supposed to go, but had mono, and not for a cool reason. I got mono for like sharing water bottles. Not like making out with it was sharing water bottles. Got mono, couldn't go see Something Corporate with Good Charlotte.
Oh.
I didn't get to see Something Corporate until their reunion concert 2010.
Nice.
They did the Bamboozle, and I went to the Chicago show for that, where it was just like them and like Cobra Starship and 303. So they got a lot of playing time because it was a pretty big deal that they were together again. So they went at least an hour, where I heard like in California and on the East Coast they only played like a half hour because they had to share the stage with so many different bands. So that was pretty cool that I did get to see Something Corporate together once. My first Andrew show would have been a Jack's Mannequin concert, Summerfest in Milwaukee 2007. But I try to go probably at least once a year. Usually whenever he comes through Wisconsin or Minnesota, I typically get to at least once a year.
Cool. Did you get a chance to see the Hello Gone Days tour this past summer?
Yeah, and that was pretty cool too. So he started that tour in Minneapolis.
I didn't realize that.
So I had no idea that he was going to play Hurricane and Constantine. So both of those.
Yeah, you were the first, so that would have been a shocker.
Yeah, like I remember telling my wife as we're heading over, he's probably not going to play Constantine. And sure enough, he did. And he played Hurricane. And it seemed like that sort of became a thing afterwards. I watched the live streams for Austin, and I forget where the other live stream was from, but
Denver.
Yep. Yeah,
I watched them both too.
Looked like that was sort of just a thing going on for the rest of the tour, so that was pretty cool.
It was, and I try to avoid, so when it's touring time, I try to avoid setlist spoilers like the plague, but it's impossible now. Not just because I have this podcast, but like I'm friends with a lot of people in the Andrew fan community now, and so I just see their pictures and their videos and their setlist picture. Sometimes they get the set list and post those, so it's like it's impossible to avoid now. When Andrew tours among the fan community, it's like the end of a sports game. Like you can't record it and not know the ending because you're going to see it online as soon as you open any app. So that's kind of how I feel now. It's like I'm going to know. So I did see that he was playing Constantine and Hurricane and pretty much the whole set. I avoided looking at the whole set, but I mean, after that you can kind of guess, like I said, 5 or 6 of them. But I always look for those little nuggets, those little surprises in the set. So Hurricane would have been a cool surprise, but I'll tell you what, at least I had something to really anticipate, or an additional thing to really anticipate, because I've seen Constantine a few times in concert, which I love seeing that in concert. To me, it's something different that he does rarely, and I appreciate that. But to see Hurricane, and even though I knew it was going to happen, you didn't know when, so it was like, okay, is it happening? Is it happening? And you hear the kind of the drum intro. And you're like, oh, here it comes. So that was pretty amazing. So I don't think this happened at your show in Minneapolis then. Cecilia probably didn't come out on the stage, did she?
No.
So by the Ohio shows, I'm sure it was just Kelly and Cecilia's schedule. She came out and sang about halfway through the song. Yeah, second verse. So after he does the first chorus, she walks out onto the stage and sings alongside him. And she did that in both Cincinnati and then again in Columbus a couple nights later. So that was cool. I had never seen that before. I don't know. Have you ever seen Cecilia out on stage with him? I guess she's come out on stage before, but I didn't know that until that time.
I do not think so. I definitely haven't seen her come out on stage. I think he's referenced her being there with him at shows I've been at, but I don't remember her ever coming on stage. So 2019, he had that acoustic tour. Was that the Pen and Piano tour? Is that what it was called?
Yes, I've heard that referenced a lot. I didn't go to it though.
Sure. So I'm at the Madison show for that with my brother, and someone, probably some drunk person in the crowd does the Freebird thing where they yell at him to play Constantine. Mm-hmm. And at least at that point, he didn't play that song at his concerts.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was feeling a little goofy. I don't know if this was a unique thing. But he was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to play like the first 30 seconds of it. You can all Snapchat your friends. You can put it on Instagram. You can say, oh my God, he played Constantine.
Yeah.
And then he's like, and then I'm gonna go do something else. So I did, like, I have a good friend who lives in California that goes to any Andrew show he can. Never gets to see Constantine. I did Snapchat him like 30 seconds worth of like the opening bars to Constantine. Got him super jealous. Never actually told him that he didn't actually play it. So,
Well, if he's listening, then he'll know now, but years later.
have you heard of him playing that prank ever?
Yeah, he actually
Okay.
did it at the Columbus show on the Upside Down Flowers tour as well. It was kind of the same thing. It was like someone was like, play a Constantine. He's like, all right. He's like, look, I will play, same thing. I will play just a little bit, take a little bit of video, send it to your friends, tell them I played Constantine, but I'm not playing the whole song. And I
Okay.
get why. I understand why he's not going to play the whole 10-minute song in every concert he does. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many good songs he has to play. You know, that's 3 songs right there.
Right. Exactly.
So I can't imagine having my kids like, and you know, I'm obviously not an artist. I'm not a musician. I don't tour for a job. I find it hard to imagine like what that's like having your child out on the road with you. And I know they have a little bit more time during the day to do things, so that's cool. It's like his daughter's coming to work with him, but it looks like they're having so much fun. I know from a parent perspective, I know if we didn't vocalize it out loud, when Cecilia first came out in Cincinnati on the stage with him, if we didn't vocalize it out loud, we were saying it in our heads. My wife and I were probably going, "Aw," you know, because like we're parents of daughters. It's just neat to see this kid get up on stage in front of thousands of people and sing next to her dad. It's just one of those cool moments.
I'm so happy that I have that song for my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? My daughter is not who he wrote that song for. He wrote that song for his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So like, imagine just how cool that is. You know, I'm not getting down on myself for not being a renowned songwriter, but
Right.
I will never be able to give my daughter
to.
that.
Nobody expects you to.
Maybe I'll make a really good PowerPoint for her, you know, in one of my history classes someday. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
I will reference my kids on the podcast, and that's going to have to be enough because this is my creative outlet. So. that's gonna be about it. They can listen to my voice talk about them, you know, for years to come.
Yep.
Obviously, the song was written about his daughter, but in an interview with Billboard, he said this. So I'm going to read a quote. I wanted to have a snapshot of who I was in the years leading up to meeting her. So he started writing this song in 2013, and I don't know if he finished it. I think he finished it before she was born, but I'm not clear on the details. Also with writing credits on this track are producer and instrumentalist James Flanagan, and then a guy named Anders Gran. Have you ever heard that name? I had never heard that name before. I just read that in the liner notes.
I would have only heard it on this podcast, so no.
Yeah, I know. I sometimes I pull out these random names, but then I go down a rabbit hole and I'm like, okay, what else has this person done, and where did this person come from? So he's a Swedish songwriter, and he's written for other pop musicians as well. A lot of people know this song, but most of us don't know the name Anders Gran, and probably never will. There's a lot of songwriters out there that we never hear the names of.
Yeah.
So interestingly, you said that Cecilia was named after one of your relatives in your family.
Yeah.
And in Andrew's case, same thing. People do ask him if she was named, just like you, ask him if she was named after the song by Simon and Garfunkel, but actually she was named after his wife's aunt. So very similar, not just in the name, but how your daughter's got the name as well. So Andrew told Radio.com in an interview this quote. He said, I wanted to be really candid. I wanted her to be able to look back and know who her dad was before she was born, the successes and the failures, and for her to know that I'd be there for her through the same highs and lows. And I think a little bit of that quote at least speaks to this idea of legacy. Has your impression or opinion of the idea of leaving a legacy changed since you've been a father?
That is a great question. That is a great question.
And let me rephrase it too. So do you think differently? So we were just talking about, well, Andrew wrote a song for his daughter, and and I said, well, I guess I will leave a podcast episode behind for my daughters. I don't know. But really that's more in jest. It definitely, I know for me, it like changed the way I looked at like, what am I leaving behind? Definitely like having kids, it's just a different perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess when you put it that way, Coming on here, talking about this song, say we just got done with the holiday season. My daughter's 3.5. She might have some memories that she carries with her for the rest of her life, and tried to make Christmas as special for her as possible. Tried to make New Year's as special for her as possible. Did a few things that maybe were a little above and beyond, if I don't say so myself, just to try to make things special for her, build some memories for her, so that she looks back on her childhood and is like, that was a happy childhood. Maybe like the the childhood that we provide for her. I hope so.
Oh, I think that's all part of it. I think that's a great answer, because I feel similarly in that, we know as adults how we feel about our parents, and hopefully it's positive for most of us. We think about, how those memories that we had and what happened when we were young and how our parents made us feel, and hopefully a lot of those positive memories. And we want that for our children. We want them to look back and say, because we know what that feels like as being, to be adults and thinking about it. So we want them to, when they grow up, to say, that was a great Christmas. I remember Christmas of 2022 when that happened and Dad did this and it was so funny, or whatever. I think that's all part of legacy. I don't think it has to be anything. I don't think it has to be media. I don't think it has to be, a physical object that we leave behind, or, something even deeper. Memories is all part of it. And I think that's a great answer. Just like those memories that you're a part of, that you leave your children with. And I don't know, a non-parent may see this whole conversation differently, but that's not for me to say. I just think it's something to think about, especially when we're talking about a guy who wrote a song that will live on for generations, which is, I know, very different than what we're talking about, but just a different kind of type of legacy for his kids. So
yeah. Like, again, this is like the Andrew song that means the most to me, and it's because of the connection. I'd like to think that I feel similar emotions to this song that he himself does, even though, again, like I said, it wasn't written for my daughter.
Right.
But I think we have a shared experience there, Andrew and I, and I think for that reason the song hits me probably in a similar way that it hits him. So
yeah, I'm really curious, actually. So this song came out in 2014, and your daughter is definitely not that old.
Right.
So this song came out, you listened to it, you had your own experiences and thoughts about it. That must have really changed for you when your daughter was born and you guys made that decision. We're going to call her Cecilia. Now you have this song that you've enjoyed for 3, 4, or 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of changed meaning, right? Did it change meaning for you?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have called this song my most important Andrew song prior to my daughter being born. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have even called it my favorite song on this album. I probably would have, related much more to like Black and White Movies or someone else's song. Those were the songs that I remember jumping out at me right away. Mm-hmm. Just because those themes, right, being in your mid to late 20s, kind of thinking back on some of the people that have been in your life, those themes just resonated more with me than a father-daughter moment. Sure. With that said, I know a lot of people who don't have kids that absolutely love this song. I just didn't connect to it really until my daughter was born, or at least until I knew that my daughter was on the way, was when I remember really connecting to this song personally.
Well, let's talk about the song then. We talked about why this song probably resonates with a lot of people, but I mean, let's face it, it's a good pop song. And I think that helps, for people named Cecilia, like your daughter. It's probably a good thing that it's not like a death metal song that right. But this is one that you can share with her, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. I know my kids love it. I'm sure your daughter will, when maybe she already does, but maybe she'll love it even more as time goes on. Not just because her name's in it, because it's
a great song. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the piano intro that I think every time you hear it, people like you and I who are longtime fans, we know exactly what song's coming, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I think even the masses know a little bit of that. Not when you hear those piano notes, you can kind of hear what's coming next. But it's really, to me, it's really like that sing-songy whoa, whoa, whoa in the chorus that it's I think really catches your ear. It's gets in your ear, and it's I don't know, something about it. It's hard to get out of your head. And I think that's why my daughters like it so much. I think that's why my wife likes it so much. My wife is more of a modern, a newer Andrew fan, in the last 5-6 years, and then kind of went back. But this is one of the songs that really jumped out to her. So she likes pop music, and so it really resonated with her as well. But I think that whoa, whoa, whoa part is probably the most singable part of the song.
I remember teaching middle school at the time, and playing a couple of Andrew songs like during my prep, and students come in and
Yeah.
I remember specifically this and the song that's always a tongue twister for me to say the title, Cecilia. I can never say that right.
Synesthesia.
Yep, you knew exactly what I was talking about. Those two songs really stuck out to middle schoolers that
See that.
usually stick up their nose at anything that I would find appealing music-wise. I have memories of middle schoolers around that time that were drawn to this song.
Yeah.
Not drawn to it enough that they asked me for more.
They're like,
not drawn
that
to
Andrew McMahon guy.
Yeah. Yeah, like let's not get too carried away, but I remember them liking it.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it is with my kids too, because they like really pop music. That's a kind of more of the stuff they're in. But like Andrew, the crossover, I'll say crossover Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness stuff, like the closer to pop stuff, like Synesthesia, they like that song too. Fire Escape, Cecilia and the Satellite, they like those songs a lot. Like we talked about this earlier, it's more electronic than I have ever given it credit for, which again, credit to the production, because it sounds like a band playing it. And you think about Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness as a band, and they perform it so well in concert, so it comes off like a band. But it really, on the recording, actually pretty electronic. Just, beats and keyboards and vocals. So how about lyrics? Let's talk some lyrics.
Let's do it.
You said that you have some lyrics hanging up.
For all the things my hands have held, the best by far is you.
I love that quote. Obviously, great quote to think about your children with, and I think a lot of people can identify with that. So it makes perfect sense why you'd have that hanging up in her room. Does she make the connection? Your daughter, as young as she is, that's from that song, or no? Is she just like,
no?
Those are just words on a.
Yeah, I mean, she's just starting to read and ask what words spell and letter sounds and things like that. So she's a little over her head still, but
oh, certainly. So we have the same words hanging in our hallway out here. My wife gave it to me as a Christmas gift. I think it was 2 Christmases ago now. And so I have it's like made of wood. It's obviously identifiable for any parent that thinks about their children in that way. There's a few good lyrics there. Are there any other lyrics in this song that kind of jump out at you that are like special to you, maybe as a parent? Or
I wouldn't say as a parent. I mean, the entire song is special to me as a parent, right? Just the idea that, and I'm not trying to make the point that you can't be self-actualized unless you have kids, because I don't believe that. There are so many different ways to achieve self-actualization, and it doesn't have to be kids. But for me, it was. I have such fond memories of my life before kids. I have such great friendships from my life before kids. I have such great hobbies. I have some accomplishments. I still care about those things, and I still, have been lucky enough to maintain those relationships. And I love a good vacation without the kids from time to time, and I love a good night out without the kids from time to time. They are my top priority, and it's not because they have to be. It's because I want them to be my top priority. And that's why, just the song overall speaks to me so much, is it kind of reminds me of that. But there is one line in the song that does remind me of my life before kids, and just gives me like a little every time I hear it.
What's that?
You don't want to guess, or?
Oh, I'll try to guess. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, that's tough. Okay, Cafe Crawled Through Amsterdam.
The next one.
Been Around the World with a Punk Rock Band.
I hear that line, and right, we've talked about this. This is a song that our parents know. This is a song that all these random people know.
Yeah.
But they didn't know who Something Corporate was. But when he says that line, I just, I want to just do a little fist pump and be like, I know I wasn't in Something Corporate, but I feel like he's talking about something right there that I was a part of, because I was a Something Corporate fan. And yeah.
I love the way you put that. That was something I was a part of. Absolutely. I love when he references, and there's been other songs too where he references the quote olden days, and it is cool. There's some of that stuff on his newer album too. Those throwbacks, those callbacks to that prior era. And we as fans can be like, yes, I remember that. Yeah, I was, like you said, I love the way you put it. I was part of that. I feel part of that. Yeah, I gotta admit, I was between a few. Like, I saw Cafe Crawled Through Amsterdam. I was like, oh, maybe you've like partied in Amsterdam or something.
I was never that cool.
No, neither was I. And then I was like, okay, maybe you crashed your car when you were 17. I don't know. But then, yeah, I get what you're saying now. Absolutely. So I just love about these lyrics that I've been saying for all these episodes, I'm sure, that I've been identifying with Andrew's lyrics for 20 years. And he's talking about his daughter. I have two daughters, and so very relatable. It came out in 2014. I had two by then, but they were very young. It was just so identifiable to read these lyrics and know, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with even the sound of the song and how it shifted a little bit since Jack's Mannequin. But I grew with it, right? I'd just become a father. I'd only been married Andrew and I got married around the same time, honestly, within a year. And then we had children around the same time. And so now he's singing about marriage, the good and the bad and the ugly, right? On his prior album. And now he's singing about his child on this album and what it's like to get that shift, like becoming a father. I think it wasn't until this album that I realized that, oh my gosh, this guy writes the soundtrack to my life. Because I don't think I felt that way up until that point. But then looking back, I was like, hindsight's 2020. Looking back is like, yeah, I guess like Jack's Mannequin years, like you put it so eloquently earlier, like I was kind of in that moment at that time during Jack's Mannequin, and then Something Corporate, I was kind of in that moment, and now I'm here as a parent, and I'm, my kids are my focus, my family's my focus now, so I can completely identify with the things he's saying. He's like, yeah, I did these things before, but now I do that. Now I'm doing this, and this is what's important now. I guess I just appreciate the stories we get. The song's a marriage between his past and what's going to be his future. We already talked about some of these lyrics, but I want to point out the pre-chorus in each of the verses. I always like this little trick in pop music and how they change a little bit of the words to kind of keep you interested.
Yeah.
For all the things my eyes have seen, the best by far is you. And that's after the first verse. And then for all the places I have been, I'm no place without you. And then finally in the third, leading to the third chorus is, as we talked about, for all the things my hands have held, the best by far is you. And we talked about how we actually both have that on our wall right now. So
you have it in the hallway, though. I have it in my daughter's room. So that means I have nothing for my son. So like I need a follow-up.
He needs a song quote.
Yeah. So I mean, if anyone has any suggestions for me out there, send them in to Steven. He'll send them on my way.
Yeah, there you go. We need a good quote to hang or in their bedroom somewhere or something. Andrew puts it so well in the song. I mean, I suppose this might be a cheap ripoff. I don't know, but I suppose you could use one of these other pre-chorus lines.
Yeah, I could.
Would that be a little?
I could, but then he would ask, like, "What is this song?" And I would be like, "Oh, it's a song that has a same name as your sister." Yeah, with your sister's name in the chorus. Yeah, okay. Back to the drawing board. He's got to have his own song.
Yeah,
I just don't know what it'll be.
We made a playlist. I think it was last summer, and we found as many songs as we could find with all of our names in it and put them on one playlist. So and some of them are weird, some of them are funny, some of them are dark, some of them are bright and happy. If it were me, I'd probably go to one of those songs first. I think there is a pretty good one for at least one of my daughters. I'm thinking of one. I found some pretty good songs that way, actually, and some decent artists, too. Do you have a favorite part of the song? So one thing you kind of look to is like, I love that moment, or...
I think it's just overall a good song. I mean, I have my favorite lines, right? I got my fist pump with the Been Around the World with a punk rock band. And then obviously like the one for all the things my hands have held, the best by far is you. All three of those that sound like that, they're great.
Yeah.
No, do you have a favorite part of the song?
To be honest, there have been times, and I've said it on the show, that I don't have a favorite part. In this case, I do. I don't think there's a bridge in this song. After a few listens in a row, that's what I came up with. What I do like about this song is toward the end, there's kind of a build, and there's some repeating vocals. Like, if I could fly, then I would know at that point toward the end. It feels very emotional. It's like an echoing vocal sort of thing. It wasn't just something that happened when he was singing. I like that kind of stuff.
When you were reading Three Pianos, did you pick up on any references to this song? I mean, the Waited All Night for the Walls to Move. I feel like I remember him talking about, perhaps in Amsterdam, a night that he was just way, way gone in terms of being under the influence. And I had wondered if that was a specific reference to that, or maybe it was just a similar night.
Good call out, because he may have been referencing that time. I do remember that part of the book, and definitely sounds like a drug reference, like a drug-induced reference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he is referencing that actually.
Even like the Been Around the World with the punk rock band I alluded to earlier, I don't know if he's talking about something corporate. Maybe he is. What if he's talking about like New Found Glory, right? He was talking about how he toured around with New Found Glory. Did he consider something corporate punk?
As far as I know, he didn't. So I've heard him say, like, I wasn't really in a punk rock band. I think New Found Glory probably is what he's referencing, because that Amsterdam story, they were there for too. And then he ended up living with the lead singer of New Found Glory for a while after that. So I agree, because I don't think he references something corporate as a, quote, punk rock band. So let's talk about some other versions of the song real quick. So, like, there's a demo, an old demo of Cecilia and the Satellite, and it was called Fly. And the only reason I know it is because it's on Camp Wilderness. I haven't been able to find it outside of Camp Wilderness. So that's like the fan club that you pay and you get extra content. If you listen to this song, this version of it called Fly, it's even more electronic than the version that we hear. It's all like beats, and the piano really kicks in the choruses, from what I remember. But actually the most interesting thing about this version, though, is the fact there's no reference to Cecilia or Satellite, which is, I guess, why it's called Fly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so it seems to me like he wrote it probably about his future daughter, but didn't use her name. And it's something to think about. Like, maybe he didn't know her name yet, and so maybe they were filler lyrics. I've heard musicians say that in interviews and on podcasts before, like, oh, we needed something to fill in the blank, so I just kind of said that at that point, but that wasn't going to be the final lyric. So I'll read to you what he does sing in the other version. So where he sings in the version that we know, "Don't be afraid, Cecilia, I'm the satellite and you're the sky." In the demo version, it was, "And I'd light every step you take if I could fly, if I could fly." Honestly, the lyrics with Cecilia are so much better. But yeah. I don't know if those were like filler lyrics, or if he just didn't know her name yet, or he didn't know that he was going to title the song after her or anything like that. So again, I love those little kind of Easter eggs and things. That version's not on YouTube, so I'm not able to link that one in the show notes, unfortunately. But the next one I will. So I talked about this earlier, Sam, but I didn't ask you your opinion. Have you heard the Canyons EP and those versions, those stripped down versions of those songs?
It had been a while. I think I more listened to it when it came out, and since I believe all those songs are on the self-titled album.
They are, yeah.
I just kind of have that on my shuffle and don't tend to go back to the Canyons EP. But I thank you for bringing that up, and you're right. It is a little less the electronic.
I just love how intimate it feels. And I think I probably said this on a prior episode a long time ago too, honestly, but I get a vision of when I listen to that EP, those 4 songs, any one of them, I get this vision of like a piano with like a bunch of like candles on it or something, and everything's dark. It just feels like such a intimate type of experience with that song, those versions of that song.
I can tell you I am going to probably go back and listen to those 4 songs now.
Sometimes I like those versions more than the originals, I will say. So since we're talking versions, so you sent me a link earlier of that girl singing on The Voice, and I had to look it up. So like her name was Corinne Bukowski, I think, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But apparently she's not the only one who's ever sang that song on The Voice. There's 2 different women on The Voice that have sang Cecilia and the Satellite. Yeah, so if you do search Cecilia and the Satellite title on Spotify and you click on songs, I found tonight that, you know, besides the live version, besides the Canyons version, besides the regular version, there's also these 2 women who sing the song. And I'll put the video that you sent me in the show notes. So if anybody wants to click on that and see what we're talking about with Gwen Stefani reacting, she was really excited, which I assume happens a lot in that show. I don't know. I'm not The Voice fan either. And the last version I just want to touch on, normally there's not this many versions of an Andrew McMahon song. Like, we don't usually have 4 versions to talk about, or 5, or however many there are now. But the other one I want to touch on is the toy version. Did you get a chance to watch that video?
I did. Yeah, it was kind of fun because he was just playing with, like, presumably his daughter's, like, toy music instruments. And anyone that has ever played with a little kid, chances are they have, like, at least a little xylophone. I mean, I know my kids have a handful of little toy instruments, and I mean, I dabbled in the saxophone as a high schooler, but I wouldn't call myself a musician. But everyone that's ever played with a little kid has played with those toy instruments, and then Andrew takes like 4 or 5 of them and makes it into a song that actually sounds pretty good.
I was impressed. I was like, how someone had to figure out, and I don't know if it was Andrew or somebody else, someone had to figure out how to make all those sounds with those little instruments, this little toy piano, egg shaker. I mean, literally an egg shaker he's using, which I've only ever seen at like the library during story hour when my kids were younger, and we used to do that. And I miss those days, actually. We used to go to the library, and the kids, and at one point at our library, they'd be like, all right, we're all going to get little maracas and shakers, and we're going to dance. And like they would, dance with their little egg shakers. That's what it reminded me of, seeing that between the xylophone and the piano, little toy piano and the egg shaker. It reminded me of like a bunch of kids just like playing on little toy instruments. So it was a fun watch. I'd highly recommend the toy version. I will definitely link that one in the show notes for sure. Speaking of videos, so just real quick, I just want to kind of rattle them off. So I found out there's did I say, was there 4 music videos for this song?
You sent me 4, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. Like one of them is the toy version.
Yeah.
But 3 of them are the usual version though. So again, I think it was all in that promoting. You have the official music video where Andrew's like reading a story to actually Cecilia. She's actually in the video as a baby. And then there's scenes. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but there's scenes of a woman kind of out on a boat, and then she's on an island.
Yeah.
And my best guess is that was like the story. Those were the visuals of the story he was reading. Is that the impression that you got? I don't know.
I was wondering if that was like what he dreamed his own daughter to be doing like 20 years from now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that could be it too.
He's talking about his adventures when he was young, and he's kind of imagining her adventures.
I like that interpretation better, actually.
Because then there were all those aerial views, like, I'll kind of be there at a distance, just kind of watching over you, making sure all is good. Or I'll be there whenever you need me. Mm-hmm. I'm not a great artistic mind, but that was what I took from it. I don't know if that's true or not.
It was just a guess to me. I was like, he's reading her a book, and maybe they were looking at pictures. And so the pan version basically has the pan version of the video, I should say, has the visuals of him reading the story to his daughter, to Cecilia. Yeah. But then it interspliced with pieces of the movie, right? So like your typical, like when we were growing up, that was very common. They would make a music video to promote a movie, and like if you're watching MTV, pretty much you're watching a trailer for a movie. Yep. That's kind of what they did with that. And then the Day in the Life version took some of the same footage. And I like the Day in the Life version best.
I probably do too.
And I didn't realize his wife was ever in one of his music videos. Like I knew Cecilia was, because I'm sure I've seen one or more of these videos at one point before this week, but I didn't realize Kelly was in any of the videos. But honestly, before a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have recognized her, because it wasn't until I watched the Dear Jack documentary 3 or 4 years ago, maybe, that I actually would know who she was and recognized her. And then I started to see her in pictures and things and realized that that's Andrew McMahon's wife. But so she's in the video, and they're walking their dog. So the dog Doris makes an appearance, and they're on tour. They're going to get coffee. So it was kind of like literally a day in the life, right? It's neat to just kind of see what they were doing when they're out on tour together. So, and we get some concert footage toward the end, right?
Yeah. And right. Like what is kind of interesting about the Day in the Life video is, in some ways, like it just seems so normal. Like it just seems like, and to him, it is completely normal. The taking his daughter for a walk, like bundling her up in the baby Bjorn or whatever it was that he was wearing. Things that I did when my kids were that size, things that you probably did, things that so many of us have probably done. Mm-hmm. It's not super apparent, like when they're just kind of on the bed, that they're on the bed of like a bed in a tour bus, right? That's not super apparent at first.
No.
That's his normal, but his normal to us is not normal at all. But it still has many commonalities. Like at the end of the day, he's just a dad with a wife and a kid and a job. And like his coworkers, right? They're all like crew members or musicians, and they're reacting to him bringing his kid on the stage the same way that my coworkers would react if I brought my kids into the school I work at. Like it was all so normal, which makes sense.
Yeah, you realize these people are just They're just normal human beings. They live their lives like we do every day, just their life looks a little different than ours because they're, out on tour and, like you said, working with musicians and things like that. So is this your favorite song by Andrew McMahon or...
It's like you're asking me to pick between my kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's definitely top tier. It's hard to just pick one, and it probably so much depends on the mood or whatnot. This definitely is the most important song to me out of all of his songs for obvious reasons. Is it my favorite? I don't know.
I think that was a really good way to put it. Are there other ones that you consider like really important to you?
I mean, there's a few that maybe remind me of my wife a little bit. There's a few that maybe remind me of my buddies. And I like all that. I have instructed some people who have probably totally forgot 60 or so years from now when it's my time to go, I want Rescued to be played at my funeral. To me, that song is just so, and this is probably not what he meant, but to me, it's just so like, I'm at peace is the message I get from that song.
Mm-hmm. That's a great track.
I love that song. I know one of the songs I suggested to you was Crashing, and that's just because that's a song to me that takes me back to where I was and what I was doing when I first heard it.
Yeah.
That was the year that I started really working within schools, and it was a very tough year, and I was just so excited for that album, and that album kind of gave me something to look forward to, something to kind of relax to.
Sure.
Some of those songs really kind of speak to me and take me back to being a 21-year-old,
Yeah.
No, this is the most important song. So I don't have a lot of friends that are just Andrew fanatics.
I don't either.
I have a lot of friends that know him, and they would all, whenever they kind of want to humor me, they'll play Constantine.
Most of my friends don't know what Constantine is or that it even exists, so that's cool. Well, we know that Andrew's life changed once he had Cecilia, as our lives changed once we had kids. I just want to read one more quote that Andrew shared. So a lot of times, you've probably noticed if you follow Andrew on social media, he does like a write-up for like when he's promoting a new song. Like, here's a new song, and he kind of does like a paragraph about what the song means to him or whatever. And this is apparently what he said when this song came out 8.5 years ago. He said, "This song is about more than me and where I've been. It's about more than my daughter and what I want for her. It's about being proud of where you come from and wanting the most for the people you share your world with." So I'll share the link in the show notes for that quote because there's a lot more to it. I just grabbed a bit out of the middle. We talked about legacy, and I think that's kind of what he was alluding to there. But yeah, I think he wrote a song about kind of reflecting back on the past, but then he glimpsed into his life, like, what's this going to be like in the future? What's my daughter going to be like? How is she going to grow up, and that sort of thing. Sam, thank you so much for being here today. I had a great conversation. Hope you had some fun today.
Oh yeah, man.
Always enjoyable to chat with other fans.
As a podcaster, I told you this when I talked to you for the first time a couple days ago. There are the occasional podcast I come across where I'm like, man, I wish I would have been the one that thought of that. Yours is one of those. I can tell the research that you pour into this. I mean, just by these notes alone, it's pretty apparent how much work you pour into this. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep it going.
I appreciate you recognizing that. Yeah, I have a good time with it. It's a lot of work, but I have a good time with it. But this is the payoff, getting to meet other Andrew McMahon fans and talking about music, because that's one of my favorite things to do in the world is just talk music with people.
Awesome, man. Thanks
for being part of it. And it sounds like we'll have to have you back on at some point then. In fact, maybe we can do something together related to the Pub Trivia podcast. I don't know. So I would love to do some music trivia with you. I don't know how good I'll be, but I would love to participate. I'm following the Facebook page now. I'm following you on Instagram. Like I said, I've been listening to the podcast. I saw that you do live ones, so I'll have to check those out.
Yeah, I host it live on YouTube once a month.
Okay.
It's a perfect thing for parents. You don't have to be a parent. A lot of people are, because you can't leave the house if your kids are in bed, right? You put them to bed, you want to be social. This actually came during the pandemic where people were looking for a way to be social without leaving the house. Well, parents want that just going forward. So you can play pub trivia by watching the questions being broadcast on YouTube. You send in your answers, and I grade them, get them back to you. It's a good way to be social without leaving the house.
I can't wait to participate, actually. I will definitely be on there next time I can.
Cool. And I will write some music trivia for you. They won't all be Andrew related. I'll do one Andrew round for you.
I don't expect that, but But maybe if you come back on here, maybe we can do like some maybe a round of 5 or something, some Andrew trivia. You can.
Yeah, let's do it.
But yeah, thanks again for coming. So if anybody else wants to reach out, be a future guest, somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. Hit me up on Instagram. That's a great way to get a hold of me. I love the messages. Like, there was a lot of positive feedback I got through messages this past month, which I really appreciate. It makes this even more worth doing than it already is. With that said, I'll say this quote for my kids, and I know you'd say it to your own. For all the places I have been, I'm no place without you.